Some tragic news out of Gaza. A Palestinian baby died Friday from acute starvation in northern Gaza, confirmed by the Shihab news agency. The news of the child's death comes after the United Nations issued warnings of an explosion in child fatalities. The infant was quickly rushed to Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, but medical personnel were unable to save him. The death is the latest evidence that mass starvation is hitting the Gaza Strip particularly hard as Israel refuses to allow desperately needed food and supplies to enter the area.
Meanwhile, pro-Palestine protests are escalating as the Israel-Hamas war enters its fifth month. In a viral video making the rounds online, a U.S. Air Force soldier just set himself on fire before 1 p.m. on Sunday in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. The soldier later succumbed to his injuries, as reported by an Air Force spokesman. Aaron Bushnell, who was just 25 years old, said in a video taken right before he died, quote, "I will not be complicit in genocide." In his final Facebook post, Bushnell wrote, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery or the Jim Crow South or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is, you're doing it right now." Meanwhile, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer pushed back against voters who said they don't plan on voting for Biden in the state's primaries over his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. On Sunday's CNN State of the Union, Whitmer, who is a co-chair of Biden's 2024 campaign, told host Dana Bash those voting uncommitted will help former President Trump get reelected. MSNBC joined in on the fun as the network spoke with a panel of Michigan voters, all of whom expressed skepticism of Biden for his ongoing support of Israel, with one saying, "We are not stupid enough to elect you again."
Yeah, the whiplash between reporting on a 25-year-old active duty soldier who felt so strongly about what's going on in Palestine that he would self-immolate and lose his own life in that way. And then Michigan Governor Whitmer saying, okay, but vote for Biden. It's really incredible. There are people, I think the depth of feeling about the moral stakes of what's going on in Gaza is being completely missed by our political representatives, particularly the ones on the Democratic side of the aisle who purport to care about such things. The expectations are different from Republicans, although the feeling is really broadly shared that a ceasefire is necessary. Stories like the infant who died was 2 months old, I believe, never knew a Gaza that wasn't under siege, never had a mother who experienced being pregnant with him and perhaps unable to get the kind of prenatal care that she was used to and should have been getting right up until the moment of birth, and then birthed him into this hellscape, and who ultimately was able to survive this bombing campaign, but died of starvation at the same time that, as we reported, I think last week, the World Food Program tried to resume deliveries to northern Gaza where this child died, but announced a suspicion citing Israeli gunfire and a collapse of civil order. There are right-wing protests happening at the southern gate where aid has been arriving in scant quantities to the Gaza Strip, where they've set up a bounty castle. Far-right Israeli protesters have set out a bounty castle in a carnival atmosphere where food trucks are trying to get in to save starving infants from meeting a very similar fate as this child. And it's a really dystopian reality that we can all see and we can all look at because these Israeli protesters are broadcasting what they're doing. We have social media. We can see it all. And the response from our government is just so completely out of step with what the public feeling is and how it's being reflected in actions like Aaron Bushnell's tragic self-immolation.
It's interesting to hear Gretchen Whitmer, and she's not the only person to sound this note, that expressing any skepticism or opposition to Biden on policy grounds in a primary that he's absolutely going to win because he is going to be the nominee unless he decides to step aside, that is helping Trump is it's that vote blue no matter who kind of mindset for the general of being put into a primary that's not a real primary. Joe Biden is going to win the nomination. It's a protest signal that many Democratic voters are interested in sending to get him to change course. It's not designed to help Trump. It doesn't functionally help Trump at all. So to see that excuse being presented over and over again, that, oh, what do you want, Trump to be elected? Well, no one is on the Democratic side has not gotten to the point where people are even declining to vote for Biden in a general election over this against Trump. We're still just talking about the primary where there is not a real primary.
Right,
by design, there is no real choice or contrast. And so some people, including in my home state of Michigan, where there is a large Muslim population, are going to express their dissatisfaction without any intention of translating that into support for Donald Trump or whoever the Republican is. And even that is they're being shamed out of that course of action.
Yeah, and to be clear, I appreciate that so much of this is being driven by the political activities of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans and concentrated in Michigan. But it's also really important not to miss the fact that there are constituency groups well outside of that particular demographic that completely agree with them and are supportive of this Abandon Biden movement. Trump, at this point, has a historically high amount of the Black support. That's not even including Black voters who have a strong distaste for Donald Trump, but will stay home over this issue. I saw a poll recently that showed in every single religious demographic group, more support the ceasefire than oppose the ceasefire. After Muslims, I believe Catholics were the highest represented group, saying that they support a ceasefire as opposed to being opposed to it. And every single group, Protestant, even Jewish voters, more support the ceasefire. 50% of Jewish voters, according to that poll, supported a ceasefire, and it was a lower than 50, I don't have it in front of me, but a lower than 50% amount that opposed a ceasefire. So at a certain point, it becomes almost like a kind of erasure to focus exclusively on the extent to which Arab Americans and Muslim Americans are opposed to it, because it enables the Democratic Party, I think, to minimize the volume of the pushback that exists and the widespread nature of the sentiment that exists toward Joe Biden, because he is seen, I think rightly so, as enabling one of the worst humanitarian atrocities we've ever seen. And as we are moving into babies, 2 months olds, starving to death, because not just the blocking of the aid from Israel and the firing on these trucks that has been well documented and which we've covered, but also America's choice to completely and uncritically validate Israel's claim that that UNRWA, which is the primary aid support of Palestine, was involved on October 7th in a meaningful way, and that justified America stopping funding and bringing 9 other countries immediately with them, and a move that dramatically cut UNRWA's funding so that they say that we're going to run out of aid by the end of this month, this short month that we are in right now, of February. Those are decisions that are directly tied to the choices that Joe Biden is making at the same time that he and his administration are begging Americans to ensure that he is back in office again. So when you look at the panel that we alluded to, that I think was a CNN panel, where those voters said, the choice isn't on me. The responsibility isn't on me if Donald Trump gets elected. You as a Democratic Party had a choice to put forward a more electable candidate and have a choice to have the candidate that you are backing right now make different choices and turn the tide on how he's choosing to interact with Bibi Netanyahu in the decision-making in Gaza. You choosing not to do that, Biden staying the course on his policy attitude toward Israel, and the Democratic Party choosing to stick behind Biden, even though we've told you we are willing to vote and wanting to vote for Democrats. They want to defeat Trump. But the blood is not on my hands, it's not on yours. And so I think that framing is really powerful. And we'll see if the Democratic Party wakes up or if they suffer the consequences of their own actions.
I mean, to some degree, continuing to fund both Israel and Ukraine is the highest political priority of the administration, and some Republicans as well.
Yes.
But they were willing to give Republicans everything they said they wanted on the border in order to make sure they could keep sending American tax dollars overseas.
Yep.
That shows you what the priority is.
Yep.
Even though Americans' dissatisfaction with that norm is bipartisan and cross-ideological, there's deep skepticism of it, but there's not enough skepticism of it among the people who actually
what happened to Trump and kids in cages and all of that narrative that was key to, I think, him losing in 2020. The humanitarian evil.
Well, that policy itself didn't even change and was a continuation from Obama.
That is exactly the point, that liberals have been exposed as being very empty in their self-presentation as morally superior to Republicans. And it's not because this is letting Republicans off the hook. But if liberals' resistance only amounts to lip service that promptly disappears when the bad actor is someone with a D after their name, then there begins to be an increasingly credible argument that a genuine resistance is better off with a Republican in office, where at least you can get Democratic electeds being critical of the people who are doing the wrongdoing, which is never going to be the case as long as Joe Biden or another Democrat is the one sitting in the White House.
They don't even want you to vote against him in a primary. He's guaranteed to win because there's no opposition.
Yep, that's right.
More Rising right after this.